Hey guys, Mike Toy here with Bonsai Boise. So this is a follow-up to a video that I posted a couple of weeks ago. I think I entitled it Ficus Experiments, and this was one of them that I showed, but this is the actual process of making this. And it's nothing real exciting, it's just the very beginning stages of what I'm going to call a Penjing style, which is basically just a big mess of trees with aerial roots coming down, and it's a little more naturey, a little more wild looking. So let me show you some pictures of kind of what I'm going for in the long run. So this is one. I'm not really sure what kind of tree this is, some kind of ficus, but it gives you an idea. And here's another one. Looks like at some point it was kind of a clump of little trees that just fused together and aerial roots started coming down. And these are just pictures that I got off the internet, so I don't know whose these are. But it's just to give you an idea of the long-term picture of what I'm going for. So that one's a little more clustered in the middle. I'm going for a more spread out view, but just gives you an idea. You know, you see the aerial roots, see how it's kind of messy. It's not super refined. And back to my little cuttings. They look pretty pathetic after looking at those pictures, don't they? But they'll get there. So all I'm going to do is take all these cuttings out of the containers that they're in, somehow arrange them in this pot with not a whole lot of thought about positioning, and then let them grow. So I heard something about making one of these little frames, so I decided to try it. Just took some shish kebab sticks. Now, because I am a little bit ADD sometimes and not fully paying attention, I missed the point of it. I look back now, I feel kind of silly because you'll see what I mean here in a minute. But the point of this little A-frame is that you put each one of the trees inside one of those squares. It kind of holds it in place. That is not what I did. In my mind, purpose of it was that the roots kind of grow around the frame and grab onto it and holds it in place over time. So I ended up doing it wrong, which is fine, still worked out, but I will say it was a frustrating process, getting all the trees to stand upright and everything. So yeah, you can see I just pour the soil right on there. Sort of getting it all ready there. Once I start diving in, I take each one out of the container and I trim it up just a little. So a little bit opposite of what you would normally do with a bonsai. You reduce the height and you get those branches to spread outward instead of up. In this particular case, I wanted some height on it. So I trimmed it up so that they would have, 8 inches or so, give or take, of height. I'm going to try to encourage aerial roots to grow in there as well, so I'll show you here in a minute kind of what I do to encourage that, and I'll tell you pros and cons of it. One thing I'll point out too is an upside of sticking cuttings in these water bottles and just poking holes in water bottles is you get these roots that grow up top there, as you can see. So then when you do stuff like this, you have a little head start on aerial roots. I think I kind of threw mine into shock a little bit too much and lost most of those little starts. But that's the idea. Also, I've noticed that cuttings root a lot easier when you plant them in something deeper. So I have transitioned quite a bit to putting cuttings in deeper pots, and then once they root, then I transfer them into something more shallow, more bonsai appropriate. But that's a conversation for a different video. As you can see here, I'm just getting dirty and taking them all out. This is really good soil, so I kept it. I reused it in other areas, but I'm just taking each one out, giving it a little trim so it'll fit in there, getting most soil off. I'm not bare rooting them or anything, just getting them ready. And And so that's kind of a rough idea there of how it's starting to look and shape up. Now for the long, frustrating process of getting them in there. I don't usually wire trees into a pot. I just never have. I've never really had to. And it was a bad habit because I didn't really think about doing it here either, and I should have. It would have made my life a lot easier. You're going to see how I sort of wrestle and struggle with getting them to stay standing up. It's one thing when you're dealing with one, but you start sticking 8 or 10 of them in there, getting them all to stand up is kind of challenging. So wiring them in would have made my life a little easier. Lesson learned. Also, had I known the point of that frame, it would have made life easier. So, it's a good thing I learn more from screwing up than I do doing it right, because I screw up a lot. So, yeah, I think I didn't even include all the footage of me wrestling with these. It was a long, frustrating deal, and it took way longer than I thought. Thought this would be a nice little relaxing project to work on one night, and it ended up taking till like midnight. But in the end, hopefully I'll have something good. I do think it'll take, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years for it to really look good, like good as in the way I want it to look. So it'll just look like a bunch of sticks in a pot until then, and that's okay. Half the reason I make these videos of me doing it at this stage is not because they look pretty and refined and brag-worthy and, I'm not taking it to any shows. It's mostly just so as I look back, 5 years from now, I can go, man, how did I do this again? Or when did I do this? And how did I set this up? What was I thinking? I can just go back in the video and go, oh yeah, I remember how far this has come now. At the time, it doesn't seem like it's worth doing that. But then over time, you look back and you realize it's very worth it. Yeah, so you can see that's not a pretty arrangement. At this point, I'd just take anything just for them to stay in one spot for a minute so I could get it arranged. I think I was just making it even harder on myself at some spots here as I put those popsicle sticks in there so that I can wrap it with like saran wrap, clear plastic wrap, just to help hold in some moisture and humidity and help encourage aerial roots. But I don't know, they sort of worked and they sort of don't, because they are kind of holding up some trees, but they're also getting in the way of me getting in there and situating things. So you can see some of those roots there, I'm hoping will turn into aerial roots. But I may have exposed a little too much too soon. So that's some sphagnum moss. It actually was labeled decorative sphagnum moss. It is not decorative at all. Once you water it, if you water it with tap water, it just turns brown. So it's not very pretty, but it does hold in moisture quite a bit. So I'm just sprinkling some on top just to, again, help with that. And I'm not over watering this. I missed it a lot. And then maybe once a week I'll give it a pretty decent dousing of water. But otherwise I just missed it every day. Here I'm giving it a good dousing to help hold it all together too. Oh yeah, I forgot I took out the popsicle sticks and I put in some shish kebab sticks because they were a little taller. So once I get those all situated, then I grab my plastic wrap. not sped up or anything. I just went that speed. I just spun it as fast as I could. I'm just kidding. So here's my thoughts on doing this. This was just an idea I had somewhere, and I've done it on a few trees. It sort of works and it sort of doesn't. It does not really produce the aerial roots that I hope it would produce. I thought, I realize there's no top over it, so moisture can still evaporate out, but I thought it would help if nothing else. It hasn't really produced many aerial roots on any of the experiments I've done. It has a little, but not much. But I will say it does help, for whatever reason, it helps the health of the tree overall. So I don't know what it is about it, but every time I've done this, the tree just thrives when it's got that plastic wrapped around it. So I'm thinking it holds in some moisture, like just enough to kind of keep it healthy, but not quite enough to make it a hot, steamy jungle where aerial roots can grow. So I may do it again at some point, or I may just never mess with that again. I don't know. I kind of think it's not worth it, really. My trees do okay without it, and if it's not doing the one thing that I wanted it to do, I don't really see the point. So there it is. It's just a big mess of trees in there, just a whole bunch of cuttings, all grouped together. And like I said, my guess is that, maybe 5 years from now, I'll trim it back here and there between now and then just so that it will fit on a shelf. But the interior, I'm just going to let grow. I'm just going to let nature do whatever it wants in there. Only the foliage growing out at the top where I'm going to trim it back. And I'm guessing in maybe 5 years or so, it'll start to look good. And I can start to refine it a little more, make some decisions on how to structure the inside, but that's a long way away. That tree there, I think, is the one that ended up dying. I only lost one cutting out of this whole bunch, and I don't know what it was, if it was too loose or what, but yeah, I did this back in mid-August. It's now mid-October, and it's otherwise doing great, except for that one cutting that died off. And now that I'm looking at it, it looks like it died off pretty quick, as I was still doing it. So there it is. There's the follow-up. This is the creation of my first attempt at a Ficus benjamina Penjing forest. Thanks for watching, and I'll post updates periodically just to let you know how it's going. Have a good night, everybody.